This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Hindu.
Ace interviewer turns interviewee on Off the Record today. Sunil Sethi, host of Just Books on NDTV Profit, has turned editor. He's put together the Big Bookshelf, which is his conversation with 30 famous writers. It's a pleasure to be talking to you and to meet you in person because I'm a regular watcher of your show.
Anuradha, I can't tell you how delighted I am to be in Chennai. This is one of the great cities of culture and learning and literacy, and I know what a devoted readership this town has, and I'm very pleased to be talking to you today.
In fact, we do telecast Just Books on NDTV Hindu as well, and so this show is not going to only be about the Big Bookshelf, it's also going to be about Just Books. I think that's inevitable. The show, which is really one of its kind on Indian television, was launched in 2005, and ever since it has aired uninterruptedly, and Sunil has interviewed more than 300 literary giants. But when the idea was first put to you, you were actually skeptical about an exclusive book show.
I was not just skeptical, I was in fact very reluctant for 2 or 3 simple reasons. First of all, television is such a visually driven medium, and how do you put across the life of books onto a medium like this, and television only comes alive with artworks, with film clips, with bright, colourful, chatty visuals. How do you convey what is essentially the printed page for half an hour, week after week, onto television? Secondly, I always imagined that writers were a very reticent, shy, retiring breed, somewhat cagey about their art. How and why they write, where their ideas come from, how do their characters or themes and subjects develop? The few writers I'd interviewed were not very forthcoming, and I was a bit scared, petrified to be honest, that how was I going to draw these people out? But as the show began, I discovered that I had to just trudge on. I had great apprehensions and reservations. I thought it would back up in 13 weeks, so I was 26. But then I realized that what I had to do to really make it going was to apply a few journalistic exercises. The first was to try and net a few big names. Because if you get a scoop as a story, a major guest that no one else has, then people wake up. And the first such guest I found was the great Italian medieval historian and professor of semiotics and thriller writer Umberto Eco. I found him with great difficulty, but somehow I smuggled him for an interview. He turned out to be such a brilliant guest. And then, of course, people said, my God, he's got Umberto Eco. Then, some months later, the great South African Nobel laureate, novelist, and crusader for the abolition of apartheid in a country, Nadine Gordimer, was traveling in India. It took me 2 weeks to track her down and to persuade her to give me an interview. She wasn't talking to anybody else. Finally, I was so desperate that I got hold of the hotel manager where she was staying in Delhi, and I said, will you take a letter to her? So he said, I promised I'd do that. And so I wrote the most fervent plea to Nadine Gordimer saying, please, 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 it's the only literary show. You're somebody I admire so much. And I think it was just, she was so convinced that she gave me half an hour. So when you get big names like that, then you get a bigger audience because people say, wow.
They've been like a lucky charm almost, and you've also been fortunate because you've had the time to plan these things, travel around the world also to get hold of these people. That is a luxury in today's television scenario, isn't it?
It didn't happen like that. Believe me, the first months of gestation are so difficult for any show, as indeed they are for a column, or a new newspaper, or even a book. It is very grueling, punishing effort. But I kept one thing in mind, which was the dictum of the English novelist E.M. Forster, who I admire a great deal, who said, the trouble with opportunities is not that they don't come, they're never punctual. So I knew that it would happen. I knew that if I kept on trying, the show will take off. And it was only about 6 or 8 months later, when I just was slogging away night and day, that I began to get an audience reaction and involvement. My effort has always been to bring in new voices, unexpected voices, original voices on the show. Let me tell you, behind what you see on air, as you well know, is always a slog.
As Jeffrey Archer said, anything that looks easy and effortless, there is a lot of hard work behind it. But has it also helped that the writer has become a celebrity today, because you have so many literary festivals, book launches, networking, and the PR machinery is very, very strong?
Of course.
So has that helped your show?
Of course. But don't forget that Just Books has been going on for 6.5 years. And this only began to happen during the progress of the show. And I was very lucky, because India is today one of the biggest readerships and publishing industries in the world, growing far, far faster at the rate of 15 to 18% a year as compared to the Western countries, where English language books have peaked, sales have saturated. And because of the recession, publishing and book industry is in decline. Whereas in India, there is neo-literacy. There is a great growing hunger among young graduates, to learn more about the world, about writing, and therefore about themselves. How else can they do it except through books?
So the figures that you quoted just now, does that indicate a younger readership as well? Because you constantly hear this complaint, this litany that younger people don't read. So what is your take on that?
I have quoted the estimates given to me by the Indian publishing industry. The Indian publishing industry is still a very unorganized sector. It doesn't have very accurate figures. But yes, in the non-academic English-speaking segment, book sales and book publishing is growing at an annual rate of 12 to 18%, which is very high. About young people and not reading, I am sorry, but I do not buy that. You look at the number of young authors there are. Something, I alone, as the host of Just Books, receive about 25 new titles a week.
That's astonishing.
I can set up a small library every 3 months. One single publisher, who publishes my book, alone published between 200 to 300, 250, 300 titles a year, which is one book a day virtually.
That's very heartening.
So, there are now publishing imprints for children, for business books, fiction and non-fiction, of course, but such a staggering variety. Foreign publishers are coming in, bigger and bigger bookshops and retail chains. So how can it be that people and young people are not reading? My belief is exactly the opposite.
So that's very heartening to hear. And how is the show performing in terms of its ratings, the dreaded TRPs?
Well, that's difficult. Obviously, this is not a show about movie stars or big-ticket politicians or current controversies. Mind you, both movie stars and big-ticket politicians have been on Just Books when they've written a book. So whether it's L.K. Advani or Jaswant Singh or Somnath Chatterjee, of course, when they publish their big books, I go and interview them. Similarly, when the great movie star Deva Anand published his memoirs some years ago, I went and did the first half an hour with him. I've known him a long time in my career in journalism. He was absolutely wonderful. Or great poets and screenwriters, Javed Akhtar, who is featured in the Big Bookshelf, or Gulzar, have all appeared on the show. So my idea for Just Books has always been that I thought I would, rather than get professional writers, I would open it up as a kind of literary adda, a meeting place, so that if a person has even just written the one book, whether it's a jurist, an eminent journalist, a politician, it's a place where they can talk not just about their book, but about life and letters.
You know, we have 30 authors to talk about and we haven't even touched upon a single one. At this point, we have to take a short break. I'm in conversation with Sunil Sethi, who's the host of Just Books on NDTV Profit, who's come out with this marvelous book, The Big Bookshelf, where 30 writers and his conversations with them are recorded. Stay tuned, we'll be back after a short break.